Good day and welcome back to my channel. I'm going to go ahead and get started on the IL2 Sturmovik, and I will apologize. Most of this series is going to be a little disjointed. I either lost video that I took or just didn't record it or whatever. But we're going to go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and present what I did and what I've gotten done. So we've gotten the, you know what, I'll just talk through. We get started on the cockpit and I get that put together, and that's about where my pictures start. So, you know, the assembly of the cockpit, which is how we, you know, just about every other aircraft gets started. So I'm just going to go ahead and let's just jump right into it. So you can see the cockpit is pretty straightforward. A bunch of little pieces to do. That piece behind the chair, that was a clear piece. It just took me a while to find it. The instrument panel is also, it's done in clear, so you just masked that off and surface painted it. And I didn't even bother putting the transfers on like transfers. I just stuck them in the back because it still showed through quite well. Then it was just a matter of getting the pieces put together. Although when I went to put the cockpit, you know, and follow the next step, ran into a bit of a challenge. So that's something I want to go ahead and talk about right here. And so I've gotten as far as step 5, and I'm going to take a moment here to pause. Now, the majority of the assembly here has been really pretty straightforward and pretty simple. But the cool thing, I am going to say, the really cool thing about these instructions are the actual written instructions. They tell you what to do. The way this tells you how to do this actually is very, very helpful. And so you have the exploded view, but then you have the do this in this order, paint things in this, you know, in this way. That really does help. And so it's a very, very, I find, it's a useful and it's a refreshing sort of way of giving the instructions. Now, I will say some of these things are a little vague, fits kind of in me, but overall, it's working well. Although I do get to one point here that I am going to call out. So we get through, we've done, you know, doing the main cockpit, you've done the fuselage assembly, then you get to where you're building this nose piece, right? And the way this is done, this doesn't really show you how this goes in. Now, if you read the instructions, it gives you a better idea, but the way that's done, the way the cowling goes in, you've kind of got to think about it and put some effort and put some thought into this. But it's also nice. It says, okay, you know, hey, once this is done, you set it aside and you'll come back to it in step 5. When you get to step 5, it's already on your picture. So again, this is where, while this is also really good, the way they describe it, it needs to be because of the way they've done this. So you have to actually make sure you've read through the instructions. So you do step 4, you do this wing assembly piece, right? Now, this part, the cockpit floor assembly from step 1 is now glued in place on top of this. And then it's set up in. No. And they do tell you, first thing you're going to do is you're going to put this assembly up underneath here, and you're going to feed this through. Now there is this bar, which you may or may not be able to see. You might just barely be able to see it. Right here, the elevator bar that goes back through. Now, the tricky thing here is that bar it extends back to like here, and that's this bar right here. That's that piece right here. And there's a hole in this bulkhead here, which is See these right here? See these cutouts right here? That goes here. That's the hole that spar is going to go through. If that is glued onto this and you're trying to fit that up into here, I'm figuring that's going to be a challenge. So what I ended up doing was I put the cockpit up in, got that situated in place. Now I will go back and I will put this in. And I will put this piece onto here. And I feel like that's going to work better. So, but again, this is, I'm really enjoying the way this thing is going together, because that's actually working pretty well. And I like the way they deliver the instructions. So I'm going to go on and keep on keeping on here. So once that's done, it's getting together the rest of the cockpit. So step 5 and 6. Again, the instructions are really, really cool. They do a very good job of outlining what you need to do, but do some looks. And like I said, that one bit that I just mentioned, that's one of the few glitches. For the most part, though, you can see that these go together very well. Now, I do need to use clothespins for where they go together, like where the wings go together onto the fuselage. Clothespins were needed to put the wings together, just hold it to make sure they fit, but that's, typical aircraft stuff. You can see there's a seam along the side that's going to have to get dealt with. I had the same problem on the other side. But for the most part, for the majority, the fit is actually really nice. Now, one thing to point out, at the top of the tail, because that's on the fuselage pieces, you see that little horn that's basically for where the antenna goes. It's in halves. It's on each of the fuselage halves that, which means it is fragile as heck. It broke. So I ended up using this resin UV glue, which dried really hard and made that very resilient. Once that was done, I mean, pretty much once those next steps are done, it's down to putting the canopy on and then getting ready for painting, because that's it. It's a pretty straightforward build. The build of the model is almost as simple as the build of the actual thing. Once you get the cockpit in, you're building the main fuselage around it. So went back and did, I masked off the cockpit, and you can see what I did is I just use this liquid frisket. And that's kind of my favorite. I really like doing that. So you just sort of put that on, let that dry up, and that'll give me a nice base to paint on. But once I dry this, it's time to move into the painting, which is, really the next half of what the build ends up being. And that pretty much is where I'm going to call it for this video. That's the assembly. It's pretty simple, right? It's a pretty straightforward build. There's seams. There's a couple things you need to fill in, but the fuselage is big pieces. The landing gear is the landing gear has to get dealt with after you paint it. That is something I didn't mention until just now. I did skip over putting the landing gear together. But for me, I find it's easier for the way those are done, to put the landing gear on after I've painted everything, because they stick out and I can access everything else. I've painted up inside the landing bays, taking care of all that, and then I'll just block them off like I did with the cockpit. Just use sponge and it blocks it off, and then you just go back and touch up. But that's it. The instructions are really, really straightforward, and the way, if you read them, right? So if most modelers and most model kits are built such that, look at the exploded directions and just do that, right? It really helps to read the instructions. If you do that, the way this is put together, it does make it easier, and also helps you figure out what you need to do. With that said, I will go ahead, like I said, end this video here. We'll move on. Next time we'll do the painting and finish this thing off. So hope this has been useful, entertaining, or whatever. And until next time, thank you for watching. Happy modeling.